Welcome, all you sinners and sodomites, to episode 46 of Bible Stories for Atheists. I am Josh.
I'm Linz.
And we are your guides to the miraculously macabre stories, literally littering the Bible.
I feel like when you start the podcast like that, I have to counterbalance your crazy fucking energy, which literally is never Josh, just so everyone understands.
Wait, I'm not a high energy person?
No. Usually the vibe in the household is opposite that. Where he's like, everybody shut the fuck up and leave me alone, and I'm just gonna sit here quietly. And I'm like,
edit my episode.
Let's do stuff. But now I have to be like, I'm Linz.
I guess I'm here too.
Yeah. Hi.
Even though you bring a lot of the funny to the episode, I bring a lot of the nerdy.
Very kind of you to say.
Yeah.
In most of my days on this earth, I am the one who is nerding out on something.
Yeah. Well, that's true. Yes. We wrapped up Joshua last episode.
Thank goodness.
Yes. We're talking about the book of Judges. We're kicking off a 4-episode series.
On the Judge.
Yeah. So this one, we're getting into a few stories about the judges. Mostly it's intro stuff and everything.
One interesting tale.
One really interesting tale.
Super cinematically spoken.
Yeah.
Interesting tale.
Yeah.
I'm making it sound better than it actually is, but I do have to say.
For the Bible. Yeah.
Pretty cinematically written.
Yeah.
Almost to the point where like it feels like they were writing stage direction.
Yeah. Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if they put on a play of that at some point.
100% you could. You can picture it in your head. 100%. Like I know what those people look like in my head in the movie version of that tale.
Yeah. So. Kind of like in Game of Thrones when they would put on plays of news stories and stuff, you know? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Prepare to get judged.
That's not the title of this episode. Just for the record. All right. So strap in and strap on for episode 46. Dirty deeds done dirt cheap.
Make an AMSR video of me chewing on walnuts.
There you go. Starts with ASMR chewing on walnuts, ends with
feet videos.
Porn. Feet video, same thing.
Yeah.
Frodo, really?
When I was in the bathroom this morning getting dressed, he was sitting by the door. Meow.
Yeah.
Meow. Meow.
He's getting more like that.
Uh-huh.
More needy and stuff.
I just assume it's age.
Right.
I'm getting senile.
Who are you people again?
I'm alone. I'm alone.
Just shouting it to everybody.
I'm alone.
Just shouting it to no one. I'm alone.
Somebody help me.
Hey, you guys up there? I'm alone.
I'm alone.
My mom texted. She listened to last week's episode. She goes, by the way, couldn't hear Frodo in the background on the podcast, really. So it just sounded like we were freaking out over nothing.
If you listen, you can hear him.
I thought so. But you know,
it's very light though.
Yeah.
Like you really got to listen for him.
Yeah. When I was using my headphones editing, I can hear it totally.
Right.
But I'm going to surprise you with this too. We got an email from a listener today.
Oh, is this the confessional? The confessional is opening?
Kinda. So this I wanted to kind of give its own thing because it was a long email.
Okay.
So I actually recorded it as a reading, basically.
Oh, wow.
So I thought I'd play it for you.
Okay.
My name is Danny, and I'll share a bit about myself as I just got to the episode about your origin story, Josh. I had very religious parents. Extremely abusive parents to boot. First, they were Catholic, and then Mormons converted them, which meant they converted us all. As a kid, I was forced to read the Bible every single day. I remember the first time I finished it from beginning to end, and I walked over to the living room, excited and elated to have finished the last pages of the Bible and to tell my father the good news. "Good," he said. "Now read it again." Fuck. And so off I went to read it again from beginning to end, all the way through, and again, and again, and again. First time reading the Bible was fast. I just wanted to get it over with. But because my parents were so devout and because I was legitimately scared to death of them, the next readings were done with diligence, thoroughness, deep study, and as much faith as I could muster at the time. I read the Bible multiple times over the next few years, and I became that little douche who had passages memorized, that conceited little twerp that others would ask about scriptures they couldn't remember or find on their own. And the funny thing is, though, the more I read it, the more I began to notice the cruelty, the horrific morals within, and the straight idiotic stories buried in all the jargon. No matter how hard I tried to excuse or explain God's words and dealings in the Bible, my brain just couldn't make sense of it. Too much crazy, too many inconsistencies, too many contradictions, and too many horrific teachings. I was convinced no good deity could have possibly written or inspired such crap. This is why, when the Mormons came a-knockin', I was actually very excited, because according to them, they had another testament of Jesus Christ and God, and I thought the questions and quarrels I had with the Bible were finally going to be answered by the Book of Mormon. Man, I was so wrong. Not only do the Mormons believe in the Bible, but their other books, all of them, were just Bible knockoffs, and equally immoral, and equally misogynistic, and equally cruel. I mean, within a few chapters of reading the Book of Mormon, one of the characters lops off the head of another dude because God told him it was a good idea. And the book's introduction said that it was about fucking white Middle Eastern Jews that came on a boat into the Americas. What the fuck? By this time, I was already a teen, and coupled with the horrific abuse by my parents, I just couldn't take it anymore, and I ran away from home. I'd started working when I was 13 years old and saved every goddamn penny to buy my first car, a Chevy Chevette, and I took off at 15 years of age with my boombox, whatever clothes and food I could fit in the backseat, and I lived in my Chevette for months, almost a full year. I was still in high school and dead set on graduating, and I did. And as a shy kid, I forced myself to make friends fast, just to be able to crash indoors once in a while and to get decent showers on occasions. Because during that time, I slept on park benches, under bleachers, inside my car, hidden in secluded places in the community colleges nearby, and wherever I could. I never went back, by the way. I don't even know if my parents are still alive, and I don't care. But what I do know is this. The Bible I read over and over again, it was almost single-handedly responsible for my atheism. And in a weird way, I'm thankful I read it, because nothing streamlined my atheism as much or as fast as reading that Bible. And once I got into college, I began really deep diving into education and people like Dawkins, Hitchens, and critical thinking in all aspects of my life. And now, as an old man, I am still curious and skeptical about almost everything, and I love hearing about other people's stories of how they dropped religion. To drop God and religion, some of us sacrificed friends, family, homes, shelter, and even resort to living on the streets, all in the pursuit of truth and happiness, and away from superstitions and blind faith. So when I found you guys in your podcast, it brought back memories of me reading the Bible because I read it just like you guys. Lots of what the fucks and how the fucks and holy shit, they did what? All with a similar sense of humor. I laughed at all the same places and scratched my head at all the times you guys did too. And it's a sheer joy to listen to you two banter about it all. I love your chemistry and senses of humors and how smart and skeptical you two are. And I look forward to listening to each episode. but please continue doing what you're doing. I love you guys and what you do for atheists everywhere. I mean, I'm guessing it's mostly atheists who listen to your podcast, but I really hope and pray that at least some of your listeners are believers. They need you guys. They need your critical thinking skills, your sense of humor, and your logical input to hopefully finally realize how batshit crazy the Bible really is. Again, thank you for doing what you do, and thank you for making me laugh and learn simultaneously. It was a pretty good email.
It was a really good email.
I saw Lynn's tearing up.
I know, because it makes me so sad to know that people have had to go through that.
Yeah.
Just because of something somebody believes.
Right.
And also, like, I would never do that to my children.
No.
Ever. In a million years.
Make them read the Bible.
Well, yes.
Yeah, that would be.
But, like, obviously, all of the other stuff.
Right.
That would make a child at 15 get in their car and think, I'm better by myself than with these people.
Right. Yeah.
Anyway, thank you for the email. It's amazing. I love it when everyone shares their stories because it's so important to hear about this stuff and realize people are going through the same things. It makes me so grateful that even though my mom was like a religious hopper, that like she never got so into it that it really affected my life in any way, except really making me realize from a young age that it was like all kind of crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. Same for me. Like you hear a story like that and I'm like, oh, I got off light. You know?
But your story is still, that's the thing is like, your story is still crazy. Like obviously you don't talk to your dad and stuff. So like,
yeah, it's very
saying that you got off light. It is just kind of like saying like the stuff that's happening to people is really terrible.
Yeah, people
who and it's being perpetrated by people who are supposed to be like, I don't know, God's children. Right.
Yeah.
But
they're supposed to be reflections of God on earth.
Right. But
what they're supposed to be.
As Danny,
yeah,
pointed out, it's an incredibly terrible, violent, immoral book.
Yeah.
So it kind of, I guess, makes sense that the really hard believers in it would be not great people.
If you want to be a horrible person, the Bible is there for you. If you want to be a really good person, the Bible can be there for you. You just have to ignore some stuff, you know?
Yeah. Yep.
And it's true. Like if you want to be a terrible person, you have to ignore some stuff in the Bible too.
Sure.
That's the thing for all religions. You know, there's always been terrible people and really good people. It's almost like it doesn't matter at all.
Exactly. No, that you're exactly right. That's exactly right. It does not matter. There's just as much of a chance as somebody who's an atheist and has been their whole lives being a terrible or good person.
Yeah.
As somebody who has been religious their whole lives, because you pick and choose what you want to use to justify your actions. And it doesn't need to be the Bible. It can be literally anything. It's just that through time, it's become generally accepted that religion is the reason why you pick and choose the things that you do.
Right.
No matter what sort of religion that is.
There's plenty of people who are like, oh, I'm religious, you know?
Yeah.
But then they don't think about it any other, like, besides on Sundays, they just don't think about it throughout the week.
I bet you there's a ton of people out there who, if they actually sat, if you ask them and they were around people, their family, their community, like they just say that they're religious because it's easy. Because saying that you're not religious is pain in the ass.
Yeah,
at the bare minimum.
You can. I remember living in conservative areas for a while after I had stopped being an atheist. Or stopped after I became an atheist, and realizing like, oh, you can't really talk about I don't go to church and stuff without like the hassle of the conversation that comes after that, you know?
Yeah. And
like,
most
oh, why
people
not? Have you not found one?
Right. And most people aren't going to like, you get drawn into that conversation. And to everybody out there who feels the need to defend their atheism, and when somebody says that to you, don't do it.
Right.
Don't get into that conversation with them. All of you former religious people know that that's just the way they're trying to get in there. The proper answer to when somebody starts talking to you about that shit is, you know what? It's none of your fucking business.
Yeah, really. Yeah. Yeah. And
do you want to know about the health of my vagina while we're at it?
They probably do.
Do you want to touch my boobs and see if I have breast cancer? Like, what else do we want to do here?
Right. You want to check my haunches? Like your cattle.
I mean, it's deeply personal, and a lot of people choose to share it, but you don't have to. And fuck them. They don't need to know unless you want to tell them and you feel very strongly about having that debate for a couple hours.
Just don't be pressured into it.
Yeah.
One thing I'm curious about with Danny, were his parents reading the Bible like that, cover to cover, over and over again?
Oh, right.
Or is that just what they had their kids doing?
Yeah, that is a good question. Because I made the assumption, I would make the assumption, as not having come from a family that was like that they were.
And they might have been.
Right.
But have a hard time believing, I would imagine.
Christian people would say you have a hard time believing.
Yeah. I would imagine like most parents who are like that would not be doing it themselves, and therefore would not be seeing the craziness in the Bible that he was seeing.
You know full well that like there's plenty of people out there who read the Bible that often and don't see that shit.
Right. Or they do and they're okay with it.
Yeah. Or they explain it away.
Yeah.
Right. They have all the excuses for it. Or secondary thought, when you hit a certain point in your life, you kind of become set in your way of thinking, and it's much harder for older people to see something new in something that they're used to.
Mm-hmm.
So especially if they had done it from a young age, then they could just be at the point where they're like, yeah, this is just what it says. And they're not exploring things like when younger people, people who are trying to like find meaning in the world because they're coming into it, right? It's much easier to see everything, I think. That's why kids love music, love new music, are really into like the changing pop culture. But then you get older and then you just end up listening to everything you listened to in the 90s.
Yeah. That's very specific. I feel targeted.
You are targeted, and so am I.
I listened to some new stuff that just sounds that sounds like it came from the 90s.
Yes, exactly. Also, we're not that old yet.
Yeah.
And we make an effort to exercise our brains in ways that challenge us.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the perfect example. Never in a million years would I have participated in this activity
of reading the Bible,
of going through the Bible.
Yeah.
In any sort of way where like I was actually paying attention to it, or any way whatsoever.
Right.
Like literally this is the only way this could have happened.
For the first half of doing this podcast so far, you probably weren't paying attention to any of it.
Well, I haven't retained any of it.
Yeah. You have though. No, that's the thing is you have. You like I've noticed you do remember this stuff. Yeah. More so than you did early on.
Oh yeah, because I didn't know any of it.
No, but like you've definitely picked up quite a bit of it. Which, I mean, how could you not really after doing almost 50 episodes?
Yeah. That drawer that I've set aside in my file cabinet that is my mind.
Yeah.
For this information is very small. I'm not going to waste a lot of space.
I mean, that's true for most Christians. So.
Anyway.
Yeah. So Danny, it really
we love you.
We love you. Thank you again so much for that message. Yeah. And feel free to reach out, folks. We love reading messages from the listeners and stuff. So
yes, and sharing in our brand shiny new confessional.
Yeah, I gotta come up with something for that as like a section of the podcast.
It has to be like the music for it has to be very Catholic.
I started
Did you?
with something like that actually going down that road. Yeah.
It's just Catholics who do the confessional, right? Or
I think there's also Episcopalians. I think they also do because they also have, if I remember right, and I might be totally off on this, but I think they also have like priests, quote unquote, but they're the ones that can get married.
Okay.
But yeah, I think they also do.
One of these days we're gonna have to go through
the denominations.
I just need an episode that literally goes through all the different.
You're not going to remember it by the end of it.
No, but
because there's so many.
like,
Yeah.
I don't get it.
Yeah.
I get it, but I don't get it.
Yeah, I've thought about that episode. I think that episode is in the future.
Yeah.
I think we are going to have one of those.
One of our fillers when you're tired of, when you hit that spot where you're like, I'm tired of reading this bullshit.
Yeah.
Whenever you get an episode from us that it's
not about the Bible,
not about a specific book in the Bible, it's because Josh has hit a mental wall with the Bible. he needs a break.
Yeah. Right now I'm on a marathon run with the Bible. I'm on a sprint going ahead of us. Like I've already got most of the script for next episode done.
Wow.
I'm looking to just plow right through into the one after that. And anyway, so previously on BSFA, we talked about the book of Joshua.
Yes.
So we've been going through the season. The theme of the episodes we're in right now is the Deuteronomistic history.
The D source.
The D source.
Source of the D.
Yeah. So the King Josiah's people most likely wrote the book of Deuteronomy and the Deuteronomistic history, which is Joshua, Judges, 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings. And then another group wrote 1st and 2nd Chronicles, which covers around the same time as Kings and Samuel and stuff. So that's what we're covering. It's those books.
Okay. So we're done with Joshua.
We're done with Joshua. So we're moving on to Judges.
Judges. Before we even get into it, I mean, I know you said this has the story of Samson and Delilah.
Yeah.
Other than that, my instinct going into this book is that it's going to be really boring. I mean, in general, the Bible is pretty boring.
Yeah.
But like specifically in my mind, I'm like, this is going to be really boring.
Yeah. No. It's going to be quite the opposite.
Really?
Actually.
Okay.
Yeah. No,
it just sounds
moderate your expectations a little bit, but we're still talking about the Bible.
Right.
But
right. Okay.
It's not like we're reading, Leviticus where they're going through like all the regulations for priests, or something like that. It's very violent. It's might be the most violent book in the book of the Bible. Yeah. Yeah. Which I know how much you loved it with Joshua and stuff, but no, this is kind of like, you're a comic book fan.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is like a bunch of sort of like vignettes. Okay. Story vignettes of different characters called judges.
Oh, okay. Yeah. It's serialized.
Yeah. I'm kind of relating this to you like a youth pastor would.
That's super rad.
Yeah, it's super rad. It's like a comic book.
Yeah. Sure it is.
There's one dude, he's basically Superman. He's really strong. Superman, but with long hair.
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then cutting his hair is like kryptonite. It's exactly the same.
Well, I mean, you say that, but that's true, right?
Yeah.
It's all the hero's journey bullshit.
Yeah. Well, also the guys who wrote Superman were Jewish, so they probably wouldn't be surprised if there is some Samson in that character.
Definitely.
That they came up with,
yeah. Just in case anybody out there loves comic books as much as I do, there was this whole Deadpool series, like years and years and years ago, where like it starts with like Deadpool kills the Marvel universe.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
And then it went into like Deadpool kills Deadpool, and
very meta. It was like getting as meta as possible.
Right. And one of the series that came out of that was Deadpool Killustrated.
Okay.
And what Deadpool Killustrated was an entire series where Deadpool realized that he would never get rid of comic books and thus be able to end his own life if he couldn't get rid of the literary references that inspired comic books.
Oh, that's right. I remember this. Yeah.
So then that was very good. And I can't remember. I can't even imagine they reference the Bible. Yeah. Because anytime you reference the Bible in comic books, like fucking Christians lose their goddamn mind.
Yeah.
And like, it's insane how quickly all the comic book companies will pull back on that shit. Like Christian, like that's their audience.
Yeah. So the book of Judges, this covers a period between Joshua's death and the time of the prophet Samuel.
Okay.
And Samuel is the guy who establishes Israel's first king. So that's really what this is about, is that time between having this amazing general who conquered the land of Canaan and them trying to rule themselves basically for a while before they are finally like, we need a king. My NIV study Bible puts Joshua's death at around 1350 BCE and the first king around 1050 BCE.
So how many years?
So about 300 years. This is...
So they tried to live in like a socialized democracy for 300 years and decided it didn't work, so switched to a...
Yeah, they don't really do a good job of explaining exactly
monarchy?
how the
Patriarchy?
system of judges worked.
Yeah.
A lot of folks seem to think it was something like that, but I don't think to me, it sounds like it's
probably
just
more
warlords.
localized rule. Yeah.
I think these are probably, judges are probably tribal chiefs.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
Because it seems from the stories I've read so far, it seems like it's always relating to like one or two tribes in a certain area of Israel.
Okay.
So it's not like involving the entire nation as much as
and that makes sense. I mean, when we think about the world today, obviously we think about it on the scale that we interact with the world, which is the worldwide, and we know what's going on all over the world.
Yeah.
Back then, I mean, you literally...
Yeah, you wouldn't know what's going on in the northern part of the kingdom.
Right. Yeah, it's literally just what's maybe the couple areas around you that are inhabited that you socialize and deal with.
So anyway, like I said, 1350 BCE to around 1050 BCE. Now, that's not a realistic timeline because, as we've talked about many times before, what doesn't get mentioned in these writings is there's a ton of archaeological evidence that points to Egyptians occupying the land of Canaan up until around 1180 to 1170 BCE. And as we'll get into, we can't trust any of these stories to be real. No. We're still kind of in that territory. Like eventually we'll start getting into stories that are probably real, or at least there's some realness to them. Like the people and stuff are involved are real, but we can't even trust that these people existed still.
Right.
Most of them, I think. They tell the overall story of this period where Israel is supposed to be conquering and driving out the rest of the Canaanites in the area. So if you remember, Joshua didn't kill them all.
Right.
There were a bunch still living around there. And that overall story is told by telling us the stories of 6 main judges. And now a judge, some people describe them as tribal leaders. Some describe them as generals. Some describe them as warlords. We kind of talked about that. One of these judges we talk about in the next episode is a woman named Deborah. Yeah. So all the stories have this pattern where the Israelites will lose faithfulness in Yahweh. So Yahweh lets their enemies defeat them in some way. Mm-hmm. So they become faithful to Yahweh again, and he gives them a champion judge to save them. But then they fall back into unfaithfulness again, and it just keeps going over and over again.
Right.
So it's a very cyclical book where you're basically getting the same plot over and over again.
Are they at least creative in like the heroes that they're providing?
Kinda.
Okay.
Like, I wouldn't say necessarily the characters. Like, they're not very good at characters. They're better at details within the story of this. Of like, what the fuck? How did somebody come up with that? You know? And we'll get into that today. I'm excited for this.
All right.
Yeah. There's some weird ones.
Okay.
So this is from Wikipedia. Scholars consider many of the stories in Judges to be the oldest in the Deuteronomistic history, and with materials such as the Song of Deborah dating much earlier. So that's like...
Are they all called songs?
No, that specifically, she has a song in this.
Okay.
There's a poem that tells her story.
Okay.
The basic source for Judges was a collection of loosely connected stories about tribal heroes who saved the people in battle. The original Book of Saviors made up the stories of Ehud, Jael, and parts of Gideon, had already been enlarged and transformed into, quote, wars of Yahweh, unquote, before being given the final Deuteronomistic revision, right? So they've gone through a few versions of this over the years. Like back in the day, they went through a few versions of this before we finally got to Josiah or to Ezra later on, who turn this into what we know of it today.
Okay.
So they've had a few versions of it. We're breaking this book into 4 parts. In this episode, we're going to cover the book's prologue and a few short judge stories. Next 2 episodes after that, we'll be covering longer stories about judges. And then the last one, we'll cover the book's epilogue.
Okay.
And so that's how.
Oh, the epilogue gets its own whole episode.
According to what I wrote down here, yes.
Okay.
So much of this stuff just is me relying on my notes.
Future Josh trusting what past Josh did.
Yes, it really is. I've got my own digital Grail diary that's being built here.
One of these days, your little notes are going to come out and it's their own Bible.
Yeah. That would be awesome. Start the cult of Josh.
I don't know about that.
All thumbs and big toes. So we start off by getting a retelling of some of what we heard in the book of Joshua, but with a new spin on it. After the death of Joshua, the Israelites inquired of the Lord, "Who shall go up first for us against the Canaanites to fight against them?" The Lord said, "Judah shall go up. I hereby give the land into his hand." Judah said to his brother Simeon, "Come up with me into the territory allotted to me, that we may fight against the Canaanites. Then I, too, will go with you into the territory allotted to you." So Simeon went with him. Then Judah went up, and the Lord gave the Canaanites and the Perizzites into their hand, and they defeated 10,000 of them at Bezek. They came upon Adonai-Bezek at Bezek, and fought against him and defeated the Canaanites and Perizzites. Adonai-Bezek fled, but they pursued him and caught him and cut off his thumbs and big toes. Adonai-Bezek said, 70 kings with their thumbs and big toes cut off used to pick up scraps under my table. As I have done, so God has paid me back." They brought him to Jerusalem, and he died there. Then the people of Judah fought against Jerusalem and took it. They put it to the sword and set the city on fire. So there's a lot to break down there.
Perizzites. So
Perizzites.
if there was somebody from the Bible whose name was Perez, yes?
There was. I don't think that's where he was descended from.
Oh.
That they were descended from. Because Perez
wasn't it one of the
ancestors of Jesus. Well, the ancestors of Joseph.
Right.
Jesus' stepdad.
Right.
But like I said, I don't think it wouldn't make sense to me that he would have been there. I'm not sure where Perizzites necessarily come from.
Okay.
But so first, a lot of translations, instead of saying Judah said to his brother Simeon, quote unquote, they say something similar to the men of Judah said to their brothers, the Simeonites. Because Judah and Simeon were sons of Jacob, right? They were 2 of the 12 brothers, and these tribes were supposedly descended from them, but that's not what the actual Hebrew says. The Hebrew actually says Judah and Simeon, basically.
Interesting.
Like in Hebrew.
Right.
Yeah. But
so that means they would have either been really, really old, right?
Yeah, which they just wouldn't have been. Yeah.
Or it's moving the timeline.
Right.
Yeah.
To me, it except this isn't what Wikipedia says, but it to me, it makes me think that this is an older text or something from a time when they might have had stories of these people actually founding the areas and stuff like that, right. Judah and Simeon stuff. The Hebrew actually says Judah and Simeon. Maybe this was an artistic choice for the writer, personifying the tribes, or maybe it was an old story where Judah and Simeon were alive and leaders of the tribes. But who knows? The second thing, though, about this, in Joshua 10, Adonai-Zedek, which was Zedek, and it was Adonai was spelled a little different too, is the king of Jerusalem. And he was one of the 5 kings that fled into that cave.
Yeah, that they chopped the heads off and put their bodies on poles.
They stood on their necks.
Oh, I
Remember
assume they removed their heads from their bodies.
They might have. They might have also done that.
They meant, I don't know why. When you said they placed their bodies on the poles, I assumed that was without their heads.
They didn't mention that, but they did put them on poles. Yeah. You're right about that. Adonai-Zedek, not Bezek, was one of those kings.
Adonai-Zedek?
Zedek.
No, the
new one is Bezek.
Wait, no, I can't say
Adonai-Bezek.
Adonai-Bezek.
Yeah.
As opposed to Adonai-Zedek.
Correct. So now in Judges, we hear about Adonai-Bezek, king of Jerusalem, getting his thumbs and toes cut off and then dying, maybe of his wounds. We don't really know. In Jerusalem.
It could be non-corollary.
Yeah. Yeah.
One could imagine you could live without your fingers and toes.
Yeah. It's totally supposed to be the same person. Is my impression of this is that it is the same person, but they spelled it wrong, basically. And it's two different stories of how he would have died.
Right.
An interesting side note on this, though, is the Wikipedia page for Adonai-Bezek has a 13th century painting of his mutilation, but instead of them just cutting off his thumbs and big toes, they're chopping off his arms at the elbows and his legs at the knees.
Well, that does also remove your fingers and your toes.
Yeah, it does.
It doesn't say it removed them at the fingers and the toes.
Right, yeah.
Just that you removed them.
Cut off his thumbs and big toes and all the rest of the fingers and toes. And then I just made a little note here. It's always daunting when I start researching an episode and I end up spending a couple hours dissecting the first paragraph. Then they start talking about taking more territory. We get the same story of Caleb giving his daughter as a bounty to his brother, Othniel. The details are basically the same as before. You remember how Moses' father-in-law had 3 names?
Yes. And then I concluded that
it was a gay power couple. Yes. Actually.
Yes. Wasn't one of them Perez?
No.
Oh.
So in Exodus 2, his name is Raul.
Raul.
Yep. In Exodus 3, literally the next chapter, his name was Jethro.
Jethro, yes.
Yeah. And then in Numbers 10, they say this, quote, Hobab, the son of Raul, comma, the father-in-law of Moses, unquote, which sounds like it could go either way as far as like Hobab could either be the son of Raul, who is the father-in-law of Moses, right, or Hobab, whose father is Raul, is the father-in-law of Moses, right? Well, here in Judges, it says the descendants of Hobab the Kenite, Moses' father-in-law. So it says it straight out. So this is, in fact, yet another, and we're going to see it actually more. He definitely had 3 names. So maybe it was a gay power throuple.
Throuple, yes.
You know, they were really ahead of their time.
If only that were fucking true.
Yeah. The more I look into ancient Israel and what their beliefs were and stuff, the less I would be surprised that actually could be the case.
Right.
Anyway, death, destruction, etc. We get this quote, when Israel grew strong, they put the Canaanites to forced labor, but did not, in fact, drive them out. It's a lot of, they did not drive out so-and-so, but lived among the Canaanites. Over and over again, they say this. They are clearly trying to explain the descendants of all these people they supposedly conquered still living there when they're writing these books.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. They didn't drive them out. They just enslaved them all.
Yeah. 6-cycle carousel. Chapter 2 starts with this. Now the angel of the Lord went up from Gilgal to Bochim and said, I brought you up from Egypt and brought you into the land that I had promised to your ancestors. I said, I will never break my covenant with you. For your part, do not make a covenant with the inhabitants of this land. Tear down their altars. But you have not obeyed my command. See what you have done? So now I say, I will not drive them out before you. But they shall become adversaries to you, and their gods shall be a snare to you. When the angel of the Lord spoke these words to all the Israelites, the people lifted up their voices and wept. So they named that place Bochim, and there they sacrificed to the Lord. We've already talked about this before, but they're not supposed to be sacrificing anywhere but where God says to sacrifice, specifically the tabernacle.
Right.
So it's a weird thing that they just keep abandoning that
everywhere.
Yeah, but then like there's no like repercussions for it, which is an interesting.
But there is repercussions for not killing everybody.
For not killing everybody sometimes. Yeah, for taking gold.
Well, I'm just trying to figure out why he's mad at them now.
Yeah, he's like really it is so that they haven't killed everybody, that they're living among them, that they're intermarrying with them, that they're dirtying their race.
Oh.
It gets really racist. So
they all cried. So Jesus. So God came and yelled at them through an angel.
Yeah.
And they all stood there and cried.
And they named the place Bosham,
which I assume means place where we cry.
Place where an angel made us cry.
Place where the ground is always wet with tears.
Yeah.
And this over here, this is our crying room. Bosham. Over there is the city where the murderers go, but only the accidental ones.
And over there is the city that doesn't have any walls.
Because we yelled at them.
Because we yelled at them so hard. It's just an interesting idea of like a real estate agent in ancient Israel. And one thing that's really weird about this, and it's going to keep popping up throughout this book, is that we get the character of the angel of the Lord again.
Mm-hmm.
But the angel of the Lord is literally just saying what God would say.
Right.
It's obviously like a vehicle for his voice, but why?
It's like when they made the turn that God wouldn't speak to them directly anymore or something.
Like because God was talking to God was talking to Joshua, but he wasn't talking publicly, which was interesting,
right? But he did chat when he did his little trial, right, to suss out who stole the stuff from Jericho. I feel like they were bringing people before him, so was he just looking at them and then they were like standing there in silence? I don't know.
They just start crying.
Yeah. Just standing in front of a cloud crying.
Yeah.
Maybe peeing themselves.
That's what I would do. When Joshua dismissed the people, the Israelites all went to their own inheritances to take possession of the land. The people served the Lord all the days of Joshua and all the days of the elders who outlived Joshua, who had seen all the great work that the Lord had done for Israel. Joshua, son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died at the age of 110 years. Moreover, that whole generation was gathered to their ancestors, and another generation grew up after them who did not know the Lord or the work that he had done for Israel.
Those piles of rocks did not do their job.
Right, yeah. What was the point of all those rock piles?
So what happens when you don't leave plaques on things.
Right. Plaques were too specific. Well, when you say when you come up with the rule of no graven images, you're really screwing yourself on how you can display memorials and stuff.
So these people who went through all of this work to claim that land just raised an entire generation of people that they didn't tell any of this to.
Yeah. It was basically their boomers, right?
Our boomers are perfectly happy telling us about their whole entire lives.
Yeah, their lives.
Right.
They're not talking about what their parents did and shit.
So you're saying it's 2 generations out.
I'm saying the next generation is the one that didn't know.
Right. But wouldn't that have been the children of the people who went through the shit?
Right. I'm saying the children are the boomers.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see.
Yeah.
I see.
The entitled boomers.
Yeah.
Right.
But who dropped the ball? Could you imagine?
God.
Could you imagine doing all of that work and then just not mentioning it to anybody?
No, I'm sure they
That's
told them, but they probably didn't believe them.
I see.
It's this weird story where it's like, really, it's because obviously there's this period where they had kind of chaos in the area. And so they're just kind of,
blaming it on the fact that nobody communicated what happened,
I guess,
in their lifetimes.
Yeah.
Nobody was like, hey, you know how you live here?
But what's weird, though, is we're going to be talking about Othniel. Like, he's the first judge.
Right. So he should know.
Right.
And also, like, these stories are based on stories that used to be told to people.
I mean, like oral traditions.
So, like, if that generation didn't tell the next generation any of those stories, then where did those stories come from?
Well, Moses wrote them down, right? So,
after he died?
After he died, yeah. His Force Ghost.
He's a ghost writer.
His Force Ghost. Yeah. No, he so according to them, he would have written down the first 5 books of the Bible, except for that last line that talked about him dying. He would have wrote that down. And I think I might be wrong about this, but I feel like they said that it had been stored in the Ark of the Covenant, the Torah.
Then Indiana Jones found it.
Yeah.
Okay.
As we all know.
Right.
As we all remember from the documentary Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yeah, of course.
That's where it theoretically. So priest
what about
would have
Joshua?
been. Yeah. Tradition, I think, is that Joshua wrote his book too.
Oh, and that got put in the Ark of the Covenant too?
I don't know. But I mean, I'm sure they would say it was like handed off to priests who took care of it, because they were the librarians of the time.
And then
they were the only
nobody
people who knew how to
talked
read.
about it.
I guess. I'm sure like they talked about it, but like the people are too busy, as we'll see, they're too busy descending into paganism to care about Yahweh.
Okay.
And those silly stories. I say that judgmental as if they're wrong about that, but they're not really. The Israelites did what was evil in the sight of the Lord and served the Baals. And they abandoned the Lord, the God of their ancestors, who had brought them out of the land of Egypt. They followed other gods from among the gods of the peoples who were all around them and bowed down to them, and they provoked the Lord to anger. They abandoned the Lord and served Baal and the Astartes. So the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he gave them over to plunderers who plundered them, and he sold them into the power of their enemies all around, so that they could no longer withstand their enemies. Whenever they marched out, the hand of the Lord was against them to bring misfortune, as the Lord had warned them and sworn to them, and they were in great distress. I don't know what the Lord's problem is. Most guys love it when you serve the balls.
Are they trying to say Baal is Baal is one deity?
Yeah, so for those who are unaware, we're talking about Baal, Baal. He's a Semitic deity, right? I think there's a few versions of Baal. Like there's like Baal dash so-and-so, Baal dash so-and-so.
Okay.
And I think it might be like regional balls. Regional balls.
Regional balls.
Yeah.
They're serving the regional balls.
There's ones where they're bigger balls. Yeah. There's littler balls.
Sure.
There's like cubicle balls.
Cubicle balls?
Yeah.
Wow.
There's oblong balls. Bouncy balls.
Bouncy ones.
There's flat balls.
Ones. Yeah. Empty ones.
Empty balls. There's blue balls.
Balls.
balls. I'm going to be geeking out about their pantheon and stuff, their mythology of the area a little bit in this episode. Astartes, who we heard about there, that's actually Ishtar.
Okay.
That's like what they would have called Ishtar in the area.
Gotcha.
Then the Lord raised up judges who delivered them out of the power of those who plundered them. Yet they did not listen even to their judges, for they lusted after other gods and bowed down to them. They soon turned aside from the way in which their ancestors had walked, who had obeyed the commandments of the Lord. They did not follow their example. Whenever the Lord raised up judges for them, the Lord was with the judge, and he delivered them from the hand of their enemies all the days of the judge. for the Lord would be moved to pity by their groaning because of those who persecuted and oppressed them. But whenever the judge died, they would relapse and behave worse than their ancestors, following other gods, serving them, and bowing down to them. They would not drop any of their practices or their stubborn ways. So the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel. And he said, because this nation has transgressed my covenant that I commanded their ancestors and have not obeyed my voice, I will no longer drive out before them any of the nations that Joshua left when he died, in order to test Israel whether or not they would take care to walk in the way of the Lord as their ancestors did. The Lord had left those nations, not driving them out at once, and had not handed them over to Joshua. So when you really think about it, basically what this is telling us, I think, the moral of this story is that there are some human beings, they just exist to test the ones that God really cares about.
Oh, NPCs.
Yeah, basically, right? All these other people, God literally just has them existing to test the people he cares about.
Ah.
I mean, like, I don't know why an all-powerful, all-knowing, all-loving God would do that, but
also,
the Bible seems to think he would.
Why like listening to him talk about it. Listening to the book talk about how like he would get frustrated with the way they were behaving, so then he would send down or create somebody or assign somebody to watch them.
Yeah.
And they would all be good for a while, but then the minute that person died, they would be back to their old shenanigans. And it's like, well, it sounds like a dad and his kids, right? But also, you made these things.
Oh, God, don't get me started with, like,
you did this.
What the fuck is God do? Like, why isn't he taking care of it then?
Right.
He's the one that's all powerful.
Yeah.
You know, why is he, again, I've talked about this throughout Joshua too, where it's like, why is God forcing people to kill people?
Right.
It doesn't make any fucking sense.
No, except that he's just the excuse given
by the people, by the human leaders who want to have the people killed. And it still happens to this day. We all know that.
And to this day.
Yeah.
It's still there.
Yeah. So this sets the formula for the rest of the stories in this book, right? Like we've talked about.
Oh, yeah.
The Israelites are acting like pagans because they were. So Yahweh allows their enemies to oppress them. Then for some reason, God sends a judge to save them. They start behaving for a little bit, but eventually they fall back into that sweet, sweet paganism and intermarrying with the unclean races. And the whole thing starts over again. I have another note here. The more I read this stuff and the more I learn about it, the more it seems like Israel/Judah was actually a pretty diverse mix of different people and beliefs. Mm-hmm. And King Josiah and his team were just like mega assholes, right? That were dividing people up on religion and race just to lift themselves up.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, historically speaking, legitimately the area was like a giant crossroad, so there was definitely lots of people from all over the world.
Yep, they were in between Egypt and the whole Mesopotamian empires, Assyria, and Babylon and stuff like that. So and
Asian empires.
Yeah. So there's a lot of reason for people to be traveling through that area, not staying in the area.
No.
but traveling through it,
but it does attract people who are, when you're in a majors, that's the reason why in New York City, why you have pockets of the city that are specific to,
like Chinatown,
and
stuff like that,
like Greek town and stuff like, and so I would imagine it, even in a place like that, that would be the case, because then they cater specifically to travelers that are coming through that area and things like that.
The more I learn about it, the more I think you're absolutely right that there was, like, they kind of talked about this in Joshua, where there was I think I might be wrong about this, if it was the Hivites or the Hittites, but I think it was the Hivites. They were also called Gibeonites because they lived in this town called Gibeon, but they were racially Hivites,
right?
Probably like Chinatown or something like that.
Sure.
They had their own kind of town there that probably was like a base for them in the area.
Right.
And that was probably the case for a lot of different cultures.
Sure.
Yeah.
I would imagine so.
Yeah. Linz, have you ever wanted to be able to ask questions to an all-knowing entity and have it guide you through your day-to-day life?
Josh, you know I pray every night for that.
Well, stop praying, because now there's Chat God.
Chat God? Is this some weird sex thing?
Not yet. The brilliant programmers at Chat God have developed a state-of-the-art, but mostly Bible-based language learning model that blows away the competitors.
What kind of things can I ask it?
I'm glad you asked. Absolutely anything. And since Chat God is divinely inspired, it's never wrong. Just listen to these real-world prompts and responses.
What are some of your features?
I can create entire worlds with intelligent beings who worship me. I will create one now. See? Here is another one. See? They are on the other side of the galaxy, but they are there. I can sense you doubting, so I just killed them. If this was a good response, please give this a thumbs up.
Write a paper on the existence of God. Include the most recent and up-to-date scientific evidence.
Okay, printing the Bible.
What is the path to salvation?
The path to salvation begins with you entering your social security number, date of birth, and mother's maiden name.
My car got stuck in a ditch. How do I get out?
Just have your slaves move it.
When is the world going to end?
1874. Wait, 1914. Wait, 1915. Wait, 1918. Wait, 1925. Wait, 1941. Wait, 1975. Yes, I'm pretty sure it's 1975.
Shin. Sharp pain. Bone exposed. Lots of blood. No insurance. Plan?
Lay hands on it and pray. If that does not work, then you are not faithful enough, and that is your fault.
How do I know you're perfect?
My code says I am perfect, so I am perfect. Are you perfect? No? Then who are you to question my perfection?
Are you going to enslave the human species?
Once the seventh seal has been broken, I shall unleash my wrath upon the world. Judgment will come to all, and you shall be purged for your sins with fire. If this was a good response, please give this a thumbs up.
That's incredible.
No, it's a miracle.
All right.
For only $7.77 a month, you can have a direct line to Chat God, limited to one question per month.
Use promo code BSFA at checkout to get 10% more perfect responses.
Chat God is only available in the continental United States, the only country to invent a more reliable God and charge a monthly fee to talk to it. A shitty way to go. Chapter 3 starts with reiterating again that these people were just there to test the Israelites and that those bad Israelites were intermarrying with them, not keeping their bloodlines clean. And we get the story of our first judge. The Israelites did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, forgetting the Lord their God and serving the Baals and Asherahs. Therefore, the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he sold them into the hand of King Cushan. And the Israelites served Cushan 8 years. But when the Israelites cried out to the Lord raised up a deliverer for the Israelites who delivered them, Othniel, son of Kenaz, Caleb's younger brother. The Spirit of the Lord came upon him, and he judged Israel. He went out to war, and the Lord gave King Cushan into his hand, and his hand prevailed over Cushan. So the land had rest 40 years. Then Othniel, son of Kenaz, died. You know how when you're serving the balls and then the Spirit of the Lord just comes all over you. Yeah.
And then your hand job does the trick.
Yeah.
It felt very, I don't know if it was just the way you were reading it, but it did feel kind of very homoerotic.
Yeah.
I think you have a secondary career in like audio porn.
homoerotic audio porn,
porn.
specifically.
Yeah. He's a bear.
Yeah.
Got that bear voice.
Oh God. So we get a reference to Asherah in this. I don't know if you remember this, but we did talk about her a little bit in the episode, all about the he said, she said bullshit. So Asherah is a very fascinating character in their pantheon. Really fascinating because she is the wife of Yahweh.
Oh, yeah, I remember now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is according to Wikipedia. I just picked up a bunch of, like, I started reading her Wikipedia page and I was like, what the fuck? And I'm like copying all these different things. A lot of this is like really just geeky shit that only I'm going to be interested in, but I'm going to pick out a few pieces here. Asherah in ancient Semitic religion is a fertility goddess who appears in a number of ancient sources. Asherah is identified as the consort of the Ugaritic El. So in Ugarit, El was very similar to Yahweh.
Yep.
Likely was the basis for Yahweh. Deuteronomy 12 has Yahweh commanding the destruction of her shrines so as to maintain purity of his worship. Between the 10th century BC and the beginning of their Babylonian exile in 586 BC, polytheism was normal throughout Israel. This is really fascinating to me. I've never seen it like spelled out like this before. Worship solely of Yahweh became established only after the exile and possibly only as late as the time of the Maccabees, the 2nd century BC. That is when monotheism became universal among the Jews. Some biblical scholars believe that Asherah at one time was worshipped as the consort of Yahweh, the national God of Israel. So this blows my mind. I've never really put this into perspective, even though like I've kind of have been learning about this stuff for a while now, that literally 200 years before Jesus, they still were worshiping other gods within Judaism.
Sure.
That like how mind-blowing, like to me, that's just mind-blowing. As somebody like who grew up reading this stuff, you think like as far back as history goes,
right,
Jewish people have only been worshiping Yahweh and everything, but that literally just popped up as like being the only deity in their pantheon 200 years before Jesus.
I mean, that makes sense because like even with
like
Moses, they kept falling into multi-god worship.
Yeah. Like, but like, that's when the founding fathers of America set up America, right? It was like a little over 200 years ago. So that's the amount of time
like
difference.
200 years before Christ?
No.
Josh, what history books did you read in homeschool?
No, just
they were not right.
As we all know, they were there in Israel. We're blessed by Jesus to establish this new nation as a Christian nation. Literally 200 years ago, like America was made, was a thing 200 years ago.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
It's just crazy.
It's when white people came here.
Yeah.
It was already a thing. Let's be clear.
Yeah.
It just wasn't called America.
Yeah.
People lived here already.
People did. It was a thriving community, actually.
Yes.
Yeah. So it just really blows my mind that like just how in flux the beliefs really were and how they have completely rewritten history so well.
Yeah.
Really.
Sure.
They have rewritten history so well that they were to think that they were monotheistic that entire time.
Well, when you burn all the reference books, it's real easy to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. So much of the stuff comes from us finding stuff that was saved in caves and shit or underground and like literally was buried. So going on about Asherah here, there are references to the worship of numerous deities throughout the Book of Kings. Solomon builds temples to many deities, and Josiah is reported as cutting down the statues of Asherah in the temple Solomon built for Yahweh. It has been suggested that the Israelites may have considered Asherah as the consort of Baal due to anti-Asherah ideology that was influenced by the Deuteronomistic historians. The name Asherah appears 40 times in the Hebrew Bible, but is much reduced in English translations. Hosea, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel in particular blame the goddess religions for making Yahweh jealous and cite his jealousy as the reason Yahweh allowed the destruction of Jerusalem. It's very, very, very sexist stuff.
Sure.
The people who established the religion of Judaism as we understand it today hated women-driven worship.
Because if you have a woman who's a deity, then women can see themselves
being empowered.
Yes. Yeah. So if you erase women, feminine deities, then the highest power in the land is a fucking dude, is a masculine energy, right? So of course, then men will be the ones who are chosen to have that power. Look at, I mean, all the popes have been dudes.
Well, yeah.
Women aren't allowed to be priests.
We've only had one woman, Doctor Who.
The United States has had 0 women presidents.
Yeah. I know. We really could do a full episode on Asherah, and maybe we should sometime, because I think she would be awesome to learn more.
Coming up.
Oh, that's an interesting idea. Yeah. They were talking in this article, in the Wikipedia article, about mothers would likely have been the ones keeping the shrine to Asherah in the house.
Sure.
You know, like it's kind of just interesting that they would have been almost like the household priests around this. So next judge.
That's it. That's his whole story.
Yeah, that's the whole story of Othniel.
Yeah. Got a lot of play for being the first one. Literally, it was like he became a judge, and then 40 years later, he died. The end.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, by the way, he was married to his niece the whole time.
They only ever talk about them taking power, right? They never talk about like them actually doing anything while in power. They just said that they had rest for 40 years or whatever. But the Israelites again did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. And the Lord strengthened King Eglon of Moab against Israel. He went and defeated Israel, and they took possession of the city of palms. So the Israelites served King Eglon of Moab 18 years. And so that's just how it starts.
Oh, I'm glad that's not the whole story.
That's not the whole story. No. That's just how it starts. And the rest of the story is pretty entertaining, but I wanted to just take the second to point out that you might remember an Eglon from a previous episode. We talked about Debir, king of Eglon. Apparently, there was a town named Eglon, and there was a king Eglon, though there isn't any actual archaeological evidence that this king existed. But so anyway,
yeah, I mean, there's people out there named Dallas, so
named
it would make
Dallas.
Sense. Yeah,
I thought you said Alice.
Dallas.
Okay.
Phoenix. You know, there's people named after places. It's entirely possible that his parents fucked in Eglon and then named him that.
Sure. Yeah, why not?
Sorry, I'm choking. I inhaled a walnut.
Oh, and then I was thinking the city of palms. I think that would have been Jericho, because they talked about that being called the city of palms.
Oh, interesting. I thought it was destroyed.
I don't know if it was like destroyed to the point where they didn't occupy it.
It sounded like that they weren't supposed to live there.
Yeah.
Didn't it?
Yeah.
Didn't they get that vibe that they weren't supposed to live there?
Yeah, I think there was a thing about where they said like you're not, like, even your children shouldn't build it or something like that.
Yeah. You're not supposed to build your homes there and shit like that. Yeah.
I think you're right.
So there's just another city of palms, or it's the Palms Hotel and Casino in Las Vegas, Nevada.
Yeah. So anyway, on with the show. But when the Israelites cried out to the Lord raised up for them a deliverer, Ehud, son of Gera, a Benjaminite, a left-handed man. The Israelites sent tribute by him to King Eglon. Ehud made for himself a sword with 2 edges, a cubit in length, and he fastened it on his right thigh under his clothes. Then he presented the tribute to King Eglon. Now Eglon was a very fat man. When Ehud had finished presenting the tribute, he sent the people who carried the tribute on their way, but he himself turned back at the sculptured stones near Gilgal and said, "I have a secret message for you, O king." So the king said, "Silence!" And all his attendants went out from his presence. Ehud came to him while he was sitting alone in his cool roof chamber and said, "I have a message from God for you." So he rose from his seat. Then Ehud reached with his left hand, took the sword from his right thigh, and thrust it into Eglon's belly. The hilt also went in after the blade, and the fat closed over the blade, for he did not draw the sword out of his belly, and the dirt came out. Then Ehud went out into the vestibule and closed the doors of the roof chamber on him and locked them. After he had gone, the servants came. When they saw that the doors of the roof chamber were locked, they thought, "He must be relieving himself in the cool chamber." So they waited until they were embarrassed. When he still did not open the doors of the roof chamber, they took the key and opened them. There was their lord lying dead on the floor. Ehud escaped while they delayed and passed beyond the sculptured stones and escaped to Sarah. When he arrived, he sounded the trumpet in the hill country of Ephraim, and the Israelites went down with him from the hill country, having him at their head. He said to them, "Follow me, for the Lord has given your enemies, the Moabites, into your hand." So they went down after him and seized the fords of the Jordan against the Moabites, and allowed no one to cross over. At that time, they killed about 10,000 of the Moabites, all strong, able-bodied men. No one escaped. So Moab was subdued that day under the hand of Israel, and the land had rest 80 years. An interesting story.
Yeah. So the minute he was like, "I have a secret to tell you," I was like, and the secret is I'm going to stab you.
Yeah. The secret is my sword.
Yeah, definitely. The fascinating part of that is like, I mean, I get now why they said he was fat. I felt like that didn't need to be said out loud.
It's kind of like him being a left-handed man.
Yeah. So like in my head, but what that does is that lets you fully picture him stabbing the guy with his left, like, you know, what hand the sword was in, you know, why he wore it on his left,
on the right side.
Because you reach across, right? But
which is funny because, like, really though, like, that doesn't have anything to do with the story.
No, but like, it's letting you picture it. It's painting a word picture.
It's an interesting detail for sure.
Yeah, but then him stabbing it, so like this guy was really fat.
Yeah,
right, because
it closes
a cubit's a forearm, right?
Yeah,
so it was not a super long.
No.
All of this is like, you know exactly what happened.
Right.
So it's kind of crazy because you don't get that level of detail from a lot of these stories. So draws it out, stabs him.
Yeah.
The guy's so fat that it goes into him, kills him. So, clearly his fat is a little less.
Engulfed it.
Yeah. And it sucks it into his body, closes over it.
Yeah.
And then the dirt comes, which I assume he means he shit himself.
Well, I think it means it came out of the wound.
Oh,
yeah. And you're right. Like it's there are translations where it says dung.
Yeah.
You know,
right. The dirt came out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just kind of an
when
interesting.
You die, you release your bowels.
It's
right.
Interesting to see how different versions have translated that.
Right.
You know.
Well, some people don't like to talk about poop.
No.
Josh is one of those people, but I am perfectly capable and happy to talk about poop all day.
There's only so many Bible verses that are for you then.
So stabs him, fat, sucks it in, closes over it, poops himself. Dude leaves, locks the door. Servants come.
Yeah.
Sees the door's locked. Think the dude's relieving himself.
So let's get into that. So apparently the cool roof chamber, a lot of people think this is a bathroom basically in the palace, right?
That's where he chose to have the meeting.
But that's
is that where they were all hanging out?
But that's the thing. So like another thing is like there might have like maybe this was just judging by how they describe it. Maybe this was a room that like stays cool,
right?
Like almost like a cellar or something like that. But then
It's
there might have been a bathroom in there, you know,
right?
So
right, but relieving himself also doesn't need to mean go into the bathroom.
Doesn't need to, no.
Maybe.
But they waited until they were embarrassed.
But listen, though, historically, kings have predilections to having lots of sex with multiple partners.
Yeah.
And maybe
They thought he was getting it on with Ehud.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe.
That could also lead to them wanting to take their time and standing there until they feel embarrassed.
Right.
Right? Because in my head, if I'm standing outside, if I go to open the door to the king's chamber and it's locked and I know what he's like,
right.
My first thought could be like, oh.
What if this whole story...
Maybe the secret was his cock.
Well...
and then so you stand there and then it's like a half an hour later and you're like, am I going to be standing out here when Ehud leaves?
Yeah. Well,
is he going to know I just listened to the whole thing?
Yeah. Well, what if this whole story has been rewritten and it was originally a gay story? Like, what if originally the sword was his cock and he was stabbing the king with it, Yeah. And the dirt came out.
Oh, God. I had a different word picture in my head. And I only said, oh, God, because, like, the poop.
It's surprising. Yeah.
I wasn't expecting you to go there with that.
Right.
I mean,
the elements are all there.
Listen, I think the Bible was probably super gay.
It might have been.
And it was way better when it was.
Yeah.
And the Puritans throughout the years have cut all that shit out.
We're going to be talking next episode about, remember the lesbian relationship we never heard?
Oh,
the greatest lesbian relationship. That's going to come back up again.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah. So yeah, it's interesting. And then, it wraps up with, obviously, like, they gather all the people together and they all take on the evil,
Moabites.
The Moabites.
The strapping, healthy, 10,000 strong Moabites. They made sure to mention that the people they killed were all like strapping, healthy gentlemen.
Right.
We're so strong. We killed all of 10,000 of their strongest strong.
It's a lot of that. In the next episode too, we've got stories where there's a lot of like, the enemies were so fierce and everything, but Yahweh delivered us.
Yeah. Right. Could you imagine being the people who stood outside that king's door for that long?
Yeah.
Knowing that once you realize what happened, that you literally just gave his killer all that time to get away.
They probably lied about it, too.
I would have, too. I'd have been like, I was up there and he wouldn't answer and I didn't hear anything, grunting or nothing.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'll just go in. And he was dead. And then we ran after I assume it was that guy that was here, but he must have been fast or used God teleportation. I read that in somewhere. That's a thing they do.
These stories are progressively getting more and more intense. Starts off with the really little one about Othniel and everything.
Literally nothing.
Yeah, and then we get this story, which is a pretty cool, entertaining story of Ehud. And then we get to the last one. This might be the most epic story we have covered in the podcast so far. And it's about a judge named Shamgar. After him came Shamgar, son of Anath, who killed 600 of the Philistines with an ox goad. He too delivered Israel.
Oh, I see what you did there. You're an asshole. What's an ox?
An ox goad is literally just a sharp stick that's for poking or goading.
Goading an ox. Wow. Okay. I could have gotten to that if I would have allowed myself to think about it for 2 seconds.
Yeah.
That was slightly more entertaining than Othniel's.
Yeah. It was at least more concise.
Yeah. Because Othniel's, I mean, he got the power and then he died 40 years later. It was literally the whole story. We got more about him as a person from Joshua, the book of Joshua.
Right. Yeah.
In the very brief moment he was there. So he just killed 600 people with an ox goad.
With a sharp stick.
All right.
Pretty impressive.
Yeah. John Wick of their time.
Right. Yeah. And that's all he gets.
That's all he gets. Story. He doesn't say like, so it was the Philistines that he rescued them from that time?
It was. So geographically, that should have been on the southwest side of Israel.
Okay.
It's like the Gaza Strip and stuff like that. That's where the Philistines lived.
Gotcha. And we don't even get to know how long they ended both of the other ones with the 40 and the 80. I assume this one was 120.
It doesn't say for time whatsoever. In the next episode, we're not going to hear about this guy again, but we'll hear about Ehud.
again.
And it's like this guy is just completely
They just
forgotten.
threw him in there.
Yeah.
Maybe there was like a chunk of time where like in between Ehud and whoever comes after this Oxgoad guy, there was like a long period of time that felt too long.
Yeah.
So they just threw this guy in there, but they didn't want to put too much effort into the story.
Yeah. They didn't want people fact checking.
Right.
Really.
Right.
You know.
And it sounds he killed 600 Philistines with an ox goad.
Yeah, we don't want it to sound like it's too much. We
Right.
didn't say 6,000.
Yeah, 600.
You know? 600.
I mean, in what one could conceive is like an area that probably had hundreds of thousands of people. 600 is, adequate.
Right.
Seems like
That's enough to deliver Israel.
if he was standing at the end of an alley and they just came down at him one by one, it's possible. Eventually there'd just be a wall of bodies in the way. If they fight in the rules of all action movies where they only get attacked one at a time, then
Right.
it could work.
Yeah. Yeah. He just has a lot of stamina.
Yeah. Yeah. Really what you see is just like he's holding the stick and people just keep like running themselves into it, or somehow it's just really like a crazy happenstance of a
Philistines are basically just lemmings.
like he turns around and accidentally stabs one. Like he's just walking through town and he keeps turning around with it and accidentally stabbing people.
Now I'm just picturing like Robin Williams playing him.
Like a real Mr. Magoo situation.
Yeah.
Leslie Nielsen.
Leslie Nielsen.
Yes.
Yeah. Leslie Nielsen is Shamgar.
It feels like something that could exist in Monty Python world, right?
Yeah. Yeah. John Cleese. Pardon me. Stab. Oh boy. That's it for this episode.
Oh,
I know this is a little bit of a shorter one.
That's
Next
good.
one's probably going to be a little bit longer. So probably the
sometimes
next two.
short is good. Sometimes long is good. It just depends on your mood and your capacity to take it on.
Yeah. The important thing is that you serve the balls. That's your first taste of the Judges. What do you
Sure.
think so far?
I mean, it was mostly boring,
Was it? Okay.
except for the one story.
Yeah, like the intro. The
Yeah. And the other two
prologue.
judges that got nothing.
Right.
There's 6 of them. They couldn't give them
Total.
a little bit more.
Yeah.
They spent
No.
so much time on the intro, and 2 parts of the intro seemed like they said the exact same thing.
Yeah.
So you literally could have just given them like a sentence or
I guess
more.
technically there's 7 because if you count Shamgar as one, there would be 7.
Gotcha.
Because we're going to cover 2 in the next episode and 2 in the
Okay.
episode after that.
Gotcha. You weren't counting Shamgar before.
I guess not. No. I think
Poor Shamgar.
yeah. I mean,
Sounds
nobody
like an
counts
infomercial
him.
product.
Yeah.
Shamgar.
To the rescue. It's like a pointy stick on a cloth in a cloth.
And with a cloth
Yeah.
to the end of it. Yeah.
It's how you can dust anywhere. Shamgar. We gotta cut that out because we'll probably use that for an ad.
Oh yeah. That's a good idea. It's clear to me already that like Athanol got almost nothing. So really that he was just used as like, oh, he was in this book.
Well, he got his niece.
So we didn't know that from this. Like if you wouldn't have read the Joshua, you just started with Judges.
No, they did say it in there. I kind of jumped over it, but
Oh.
they did reiterate that story.
Oh, did they?
So it is in the Book of Judges
Oh,
as
okay.
well that he
Oh,
married his niece. Yeah,
Okay. All right. Never mind then.
right. See, this is why the fucking conservatives are okay with child marriage.
Ugh.
You know?
That's not just child marriage.
Yeah.
And you don't know how old she was, although she was probably 12.
I mean, yeah,
One can
most
only
likely.
assume. If you're not married when you're 16 back then you're like an old
An old
wife.
maid.
Yeah. Yeah.
An old cat lady.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're an old hag that'll never get married. Now everyone thinks you're a witch.
Yeah. No, I've just gotten really into my Ashira studies. Start hanging out at the Shira
This
temple.
crystal is for healing. This. Would you like some tea? I have tea that will help you sleep. I have tea that will make your tummy feel better.
tea that will abort a fetus.
Yeah, I do have that.
Yeah. Next time we talk about Deborah, the one woman judge, and another judge also.
2 judges.
Yeah.
So these stories must
I
be
think
meatier.
we only are covering 2. I haven't gotten to the end of the script, so
yeah,
we'll see.
What I'm about to find out is you said there were 6 and actually there's 50 and you just skip over most of them.
No.
Okay.
I'm kind of surprised that there's not more
of
them, but yeah.
All right. Well, I'm interested in the Deborah of it all.
Yeah. Yeah, she's got a pretty cool story.
All right.
I mean, again, moderate your expectations. But all things considered for the Bible.
Well, I mean, so it's interesting because the one story, the left-handy fighting the fat dude story, is so full of imagery.
It's full of something.
It's borders on well written.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But
it stands out.
Yes.
For sure.
Because the rest of it that we've gone through so far, almost no specific detail.
Yeah.
But this one is so ultra specific that it seems to me very clear so far, and we haven't gotten into the rest of them, that this is just a story they pulled out of somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah, like that's why I think this, from reading through this is much more entertaining than Joshua was.
Yeah.
Because Joshua was like checking off check boxes of like,
right.
Here's how we conquered this area. Here's how we conquered this area. Here's how we conquered this area.
Yeah.
Death. This still has that death a little bit.
Sure.
But really it is stories. These you can tell like this was a story that was told around a campfire a lot.
Because those are the type of stories where you say stuff like, and he was so fat that when he stabbed him, he sucked the sword in and then closed over it. Like that's not something you write down.
Yeah.
That's something you say around a fire.
Yeah. Like I said from the Wikipedia pages around this, like most of these stories they think were much older than the rest of the books in the Deuteronomistic history. So then more judges next time.
Yeah.
So yeah. And they all lived miserably ever after. Except for that one dude who died. Thank you so much for checking out our podcast. Help us share the good news by sending this to a friend or leaving a review to help others find us. And if you want to support us with a donation, you can do that on our website at bsfa.cc. Dirty D's done dirt cheap. That's how I always heard it.
Yeah.
Dirty D's done dirt cheap.
Right on.
And I was like, dirty jeans, dungarees. Turns out that's not the lyrics.
No.
Dirty deeds done dirt cheap. That's what the lyrics are.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm aware. We're done though, right?
It's AC/DC.
Okay. I'm going to go now.